I was dead asleep when the phone started ringing. Not buzzing, ringing. The old landline I keep on my nightstand because I'm paranoid about emergencies. I remember thinking, half dreaming, no one calls on that thing unless something's wrong. When I finally clawed my way awake enough to grab it, I didn't even check the caller ID. Hello? My voice sounded like gravel. For a moment, all I heard was static. Not loud, just the faint hiss of someone on the other end, trying to breathe quietly. I almost hung up. Then a man whispered, It's Tommy." I sat straight up. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. There's no easy way to describe what hearing that name did to me. It was like someone reached inside my chest and squeezed my lungs shut. I hadn't heard my brother's voice in 42 years. I hadn't expected to. We buried him. We put him in the ground. I saw the goddamn casket lowered myself. "Who is this?" I snapped, louder than I meant to. "What kind of sick joke?" "It's me," he said. A little stronger this time. I didn't know who else to call. His voice wasn't right, but it wasn't wrong either. It sounded like a much older, tired version of the boy I used to sneak out with on summer nights. The one who'd stuff firecrackers in tin cans just to see the neighbors jump. But there was something else there too. Something broken, something unsure of itself. "Tommy's dead," I said. I don't know why. Maybe to reassure myself that the world still made sense. There was a long pause. "I know what they told you," he said. "But please, can we talk?" Everything in me wanted to hang up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the phone with both. My heart was thudding so hard, it drowned out the ticking of the old clock on my dresser. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood, like I needed to feel the floor under my feet to believe any of this was real. "Where are you?" I asked. Another silence, but this one felt different. Heavy. Nervous. "Close," he said finally. "I've been trying to figure out how to do this. I didn't want to scare you." "You're doing a hell of a job," I muttered. He gave a soft, almost apologetic laugh. It hit me harder than the name had. That laugh. That was him. That was the same laugh he used the night he broke Dad's car mirror and swore me to secrecy. My knees almost gave out. "Why now?" I asked. "Why wait 42 years?" "I didn't have a choice," he said. "They told me you thought I was dead. They said it was safer that way." "Who told you that?" I demanded. But before he could answer, the line clicked. Not like someone hung up, more like the call died. Just cut clean off. I stared at the handset, feeling this strange hollowness spread through my chest. I tried calling back. Straight to nothing. I paced the living room for almost an hour afterward, lights still off, the house feeling too small and too large at the same time. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I kept replaying that voice, that laugh, that last unfinished sentence. I kept hearing him say safer that way, and trying not to imagine what the hell that meant. By the time the sun started hinting at the horizon, I had only one thought left in my head, over and over. If that wasn't Tommy, who the hell was it? I didn't sleep after that call. I couldn't. My whole body felt wired, like someone had plugged me straight into an outlet. Around 6 a.m., when the house finally stopped feeling haunted, I made a pot of coffee I barely tasted and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone like it might ring again if I stared hard enough. I kept replaying the sound of his voice. Not the words, just the tone, the hesitation. The way he breathed before speaking, like he was afraid I'd hang up. And the strangest part was how familiar it felt. Like some old part of my brain that hadn't been touched in decades suddenly woke up and whispered, "That was him." You know it was. I tried to tell myself it was some scam, some disturbed stranger who found an obituary online. But that laugh, that tiny, involuntary half-laugh he let out when I told him he was scaring me, that was the part that got me. That was a sound I didn't even realize I still remembered. And the second I heard it, something inside me cracked open. I spent the morning pacing. I kept checking the windows, like maybe he meant close, literally. Every time a car slowed near the house, my stomach jumped into my throat. I felt ridiculous, like a kid waiting for Santa, only terrified. Around noon, I called my sister. I didn't plan to tell her anything. I just wanted to hear someone's voice, someone living. But she answered on the second ring with her usual, "Hey, everything okay?" And before I knew it, I was telling her the whole thing. She didn't say anything at first, just breathed sharply, like she'd been punched. Then, "You're not funny. I'm not joking. Don't do this," she said, her voice cracked. "Don't drag this up again, not after all these years." "Listen to me," I said. "I know how it sounds, but the voice, he's dead," she snapped. "We were there. We lived through that. You think I don't still see it?" I didn't respond. Truth was, I didn't see anything. I remembered the funeral, the casket, the crying, but the details, the actual body, the argument Dad had with those men in the hallway at the hospital that they shooed us away from, everything I tried to focus on felt blurry, like a photograph that had lost its color over time. My sister must have heard me go quiet because her voice softened. "You're tired. You've been stressed. Probably a prank, or it wasn't a prank." "How do you know?" I hesitated. He sounded like himself. The silence that followed was heavy. Not angry, not upset, but scared. I could hear her breathing unevenly, like she wasn't sure if she should hang up or come over. "You know what Mom always said," she whispered finally. "Grief makes ghosts out of thin air. You hear what you want to hear." Except I'd spent 42 years not hearing anything, not imagining anything, not dreaming of him. I had accepted it. I had moved on. But that call, that wasn't my mind playing tricks. Before I could say any of that, she said, "Please don't dig into this. Just let it stay buried." That choice of words hit me wrong. Buried. She could have said, "Let it go," or "Don't think about it." But she didn't. After we hung up, I realized something that made my stomach turn. She wasn't trying to calm me down. She was trying to shut me up. Like she knew something she wasn't supposed to say. The rest of the day, I carried that thought around like a stone in my pocket. Heavy, cold, impossible to ignore. And the more I turned it over in my mind, the more familiar that voice from the call became. Not just the sound of it, but the fear in it. The fear of someone who had spent a long, long time hiding. By nightfall, I wasn't wondering whether it was Tommy who called. I was wondering who, or what, he'd been running from all these years. It's strange how a memory can feel solid for decades, until one detail slips, and suddenly the whole thing starts wobbling like a table with a missing leg. I hadn't thought about the night Tommy died in years. Not really. I kept it locked away in that mental drawer where you shove all the things that hurt too much to look at. But after that call, I had to go back there. I had to replay every second we lived through. The night it happened, I remember waking up to Mom screaming. Not loud, not the kind that wakes the neighbors, but this tight, strangled scream, like she'd been trying to hold it in, and it clawed its way out anyway. I was 11, old enough to sense panic in a house, too young to understand what adults do when they're terrified. Dad was yelling at someone on the phone, a short, clipped kind of yelling, more like he was giving orders than asking for help. I remember standing at the top of the stairs in my pajamas, gripping the banister so tight my knuckles went white. My sister was behind me, half asleep, asking what was going on. I don't think I answered her. I just kept listening. Mom came into the hallway with her coat thrown over her nightgown. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red. She looked up at us and said, "Stay here. Do not come outside. Do you hear me?" I asked, "Where's Tommy?" She froze for half a second. Half a second I didn't understand back then. And then she said, "We're going to the hospital. Stay with Aunt Linda." But Aunt Linda wasn't there yet. They left anyway. Dad grabbed his keys, slammed the door, and they were gone. No explanation. No one telling us what happened, just this thick air of fear lingering in the house, like someone had broken something, but we couldn't see what it was yet. We got the call an hour later. I can still hear Aunt Linda's voice, shaking, trying to stay calm for our sake. "There was an accident," she said. "They did everything they could." I asked what kind of accident. She didn't answer. She just cried harder. The funeral was fast, too fast. Closed casket. No chance to see him, no doctor talking to us about injuries, no police asking questions. Just a priest reading passages and our parents standing stiff as statues, not hugging us, not comforting us, not even looking us in the eyes. And you know what? I accepted it. I was a kid. Adults decide things, adults handle things, adults know what's best. But now, replaying it with a grown mind, everything feels wrong. The rushed funeral, the secrecy, the closed casket, the fact that Dad never let us talk about it again, ever. If I asked even a simple question, he'd shut it down with, "Leave it alone, it's done." But what really hit me, what made the hairs on my arms stand straight up, was something I hadn't thought about in decades. The men in suits outside the hospital room. I saw them through the crack in the door when Aunt Linda went in to check on my parents. I only saw them for a second, but I remember their black jackets, their earpieces, the way they stood like guards instead of doctors or staff. I asked Aunt Linda who they were. She said, "Friends of your father," too quickly, too nervously. But Dad didn't have friends who dressed like that, or who watched us so closely as they walked us out. Back then, I didn't question it. But after that phone call, the voice saying, "They told me you thought I was dead. They said it was safer that way." The memory of those men came rushing back like a punch to the chest. 42 years ago, my parents came home from the hospital without my brother and without a single straight answer. And now, I had to face the possibility that maybe they didn't lose him that night. Maybe they handed him over. After a couple days of pretending to live my normal life, going to work, answering emails, pretending to sleep, I finally snapped. You can't just hear your dead brother's voice after 42 years and then keep acting like the world hasn't shifted under your feet. So, I started digging. Not bravely, not confidently. More like someone circling a dark hole, knowing they're going to fall in but trying to buy a few seconds before it happens. The first place I went was the drawer in my hallway closet where I keep all the old family papers. Birth certificates, medical forms, Dad's old army documents, stuff like that. It took forever to find anything related to Tommy, because apparently at some point I shoved all of it inside an old yellow folder labeled Tom. His birth certificate was there, a school photo from 3rd grade, a faded report card. But what I was looking for, the official death certificate, wasn't. It should have been. Dad kept every tax return from 1976 onward. He wasn't the type to lose government paperwork. I tore the whole closet apart, and still nothing. My heart was pounding as I sat back on the floor, sweaty and dusty, staring at the mess around me. I said out loud, to the empty house, to the quiet hall, "Where the hell is it?" And I swear I had the clearest feeling right then that it was missing on purpose. The next step was the county office. The woman behind the glass window typed Tommy's name into her computer, squinting like maybe she'd misheard me. Then she frowned, typed again, and said, "Huh, it says record restricted." "Restricted?" I asked. She nodded like she wasn't supposed to make a big deal of it. "Means you'll need special authorization to view or request a copy." "Authorization from who?" She shrugged. "Depends. Usually next of kin or the entity that placed the restriction." The entity. Not person. Not family member. Entity. It felt like someone flicked the back of my neck. I tried to keep my voice calm. It should just be a normal death certificate. My brother died in 1983. Why would it be restricted? She lowered her voice. "That's unusual for a standard death." Then she looked around and whispered, "I didn't say that." I thanked her and walked out, trying not to look like I was on the verge of a panic attack. In my car, I sat with the engine off and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking again. That same tremor I'd had after the phone call. Okay, so the death certificate was sealed. That didn't make sense, unless I didn't even want to finish that thought. That night, I went through old photo albums. My sister gave me most of Mom's things after she died, and I'd never really looked at them. But there was one album, the oldest one, where Dad had labeled everything with dates and notes in his neat handwriting. I flipped through page after page of us as kids, Tommy with his lopsided smile, his ridiculous hair, his scraped knees, normal stuff, innocent stuff. But then I found something strange, a photo from his 9th birthday, a cake, balloons, Tommy grinning with chocolate icing on his chin. Underneath it, Dad had written, 9th first round complete. First round? First round of what? I sat there staring at those words until my eyes blurred. Dad was not poetic. Dad was not symbolic. Dad labeled things exactly as they were. Tommy's birthday. First day of school. camping trip. So why would he write that? Why would he write first round complete under a photo of a little boy blowing out candles? My stomach twisted. I felt like I was piecing together a puzzle I didn't know I had, only to realize the picture forming wasn't one I ever wanted to see. And then, because my brain was already a wildfire, I thought about that phone call again, about the way he said I didn't have a choice, about the fear, about the hesitation, about how he said they told him it was safer if we thought he was dead. Who the hell was they? That question burned a hole through me for days, but it was the next question, the one that crept into my mind when the house was too quiet, that scared me even more. If my brother was alive all this time, what exactly did our parents help cover up? It happened 3 days after I'd found the strange note under that birthday photo. I was on my way home from work, exhausted and running on caffeine and nerves, when I saw him. Or saw someone. I'd stopped at a gas station about 10 minutes from my house. It was one of those dim, half-forgotten places with buzzing fluorescent lights and a clerk who never looks up from his phone. I remember thinking about grabbing a soda, something cold to settle my stomach. My mind was still tangled in that phrase, first round complete, when I stepped out of the car. That's when I saw a man standing near the ice machine, tall, lean, gray streaks in his hair, a face that looked like life had sanded it down to its bare edges. He was staring at me like he'd been waiting. For a split second, I didn't recognize him. He looked so worn. But then he tilted his head, just a little, in this familiar, almost shy way. Tommy used to do that when he got caught doing something stupid. And when this man did it, it hit me like a punch to the ribs. He took a step toward me, slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving mine, eyes that were the same shape, the same strange blue-gray I used to tease him about. Storm cloud eyes, Mom called them when she was feeling poetic. I froze. My brain spun, trying to reconcile the impossible. This aging man with lines carved deep into his cheeks, and the 9-year-old boy I last really remembered. He stopped a few feet from me, close enough that I could see the tremor in his hands. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me, he said quietly. I couldn't speak. My throat locked up, like words had become too heavy to lift. Do you? He asked. I swallowed hard. You sound like him, I managed. You look like him too, but that doesn't make sense. He gave a tired half smile. A lot of things in my life don't make sense. I felt myself shaking, from fear, from disbelief, from the sheer absurdity of seeing a ghost in a gas station parking lot. Why now? I whispered. Why call me? Why show up? He looked over his shoulder, almost instinctively, like he expected someone to walk out of the shadows. Only when he seemed sure we were alone did he speak. I thought I'd have more time, he said. I thought I could ease into it, explain everything before someone noticed. Noticed what? I asked. He hesitated, his jaw tightened. That I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Something cold trickled through my chest. Where are you supposed to be? He didn't answer. Or maybe he couldn't. Instead, he reached into his jacket slowly. So slowly I actually stepped back and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to me. I didn't want to take it. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me sensed that whatever was on that paper would take all the confusion I'd been feeling and turn it into something far worse. But I took it anyway. It was a photo. Not of him as a child. Not of him now. But of him. Maybe 5 years after the night he died. Older than I'd ever seen him, but clearly still a kid. He was standing in front of a building. Sterile, windowless, surrounded by tall fences. Behind him, 2 men in identical black jackets. The same jackets I'd seen outside the hospital room 42 years ago. I looked up sharply. What is this? Where was this? He stepped back, scanning the parking lot again. I can't talk here, he said. They're watching everything, listening. They always have been. My skin crawled. Who are they? He opened his mouth, then stopped. Just stopped, like the words physically wouldn't come out. I saw something flicker across his face. Panic, pain, restraint. I didn't know. Then he whispered, I shouldn't have come yet. Tommy, I said, louder than I meant to. Tell me what happened to you. Tell me why they told us you were dead." He flinched at his name. Not like it hurt, more like he hadn't heard it spoken in decades. "I want to," he said. "God, I've wanted to for so long." "Then do it." But he only shook his head. And then he did something that terrified me more than anything he'd said. He stepped back. One step, then another, like he was preparing to run. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "They're closer than I thought." "Who?" I started. But he cut me off with a quiet, desperate plea. "Don't trust the story they gave you. Any of it." Before I could ask anything else, he turned. Not fast, not suspiciously, just like someone slipping away before the door slammed shut, and walked behind the building. I ran after him. I swear I did. But by the time I rounded the corner, he was gone. Completely gone. As if he'd vanished into thin air. All he left behind was the photo I was still clutching, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe, and one horrifying realization. My brother wasn't dead. But he wasn't free either. That night, I didn't bother pretending to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the photo he'd given me, the one with the windowless building and the two men in black jackets, and just stared at it until my eyes burned. There was no timestamp, no writing, nothing to prove when or where it was taken. But the look on his face, God. He looked like a kid trying to smile for a picture while knowing he'd never get to go home again. Every instinct told me the same thing. This wasn't a hospital. This wasn't a school. This wasn't anywhere a child should have been. By dawn, I knew I needed answers. Real ones. And there was only one person left alive who might actually give them to me. My father. He was living in a nursing home 30 minutes away. His memory came and went like bad radio static. Sometimes sharp, sometimes drifting. But he still knew enough to get angry when you pushed the wrong buttons. I wasn't sure what I expected from him. Maybe nothing. But I drove there anyway, that photo burning a hole in my pocket. When I got to his room, he was sitting by the window, staring out at the courtyard like he'd been waiting for something to happen. He looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken into his sweater, lost in his chair. "Dad," I said softly. He blinked, turned, and gave a faint smile. "You're up early." "I need to ask you something," I said. His smile faded immediately. "You sound like your mother." He said it flatly, like it wasn't a compliment. I sat in the chair across from him. My legs wouldn't stop bouncing. "It's about Tommy." The air changed, not figuratively, literally. He stiffened. The room seemed to shrink. Even the quiet hum of the hallway felt like it pulled back to listen. "Don't," he said. Not angry, not harsh, just scared. Truly scared. "I got a call," I said. "A man said his name was Tommy, and then I saw someone. I think it was him. He gave me this." I took out the photo and slid it toward him. His hand trembled just looking at it. He didn't touch it. Didn't even breathe for a second. Then he whispered, "You weren't supposed to know." Those words hit me harder than anything Tommy himself had said. My voice cracked. "Know what?" Dad ran a shaky hand over his mouth. "Your brother. He wasn't like you and your sister." I felt something cold settle under my ribs. "What does that mean?" "He was special," Dad said. "Different. They said he had potential, that he could help people, that he'd be taken care of." "Who said that?" He didn't answer. "Dad," I pressed. "Who took him?" His eyes darted to the hallway, like he expected someone to barge in and stop him. "Men from a program, a government thing, experimental, classified. I wasn't allowed to ask questions." I stared at him, stunned. "You let them take him?" "They told us it was temporary," he whispered. 2 weeks of tests. Maybe 3. They said he'd come home better, stronger, gifted." His voice cracked. "Your mother didn't want to. She fought. God, she fought. But they threatened us." "Threatened you with what?" He swallowed hard. "Taking all of you." My blood ran cold. "They told us Tommy had traits. Something in him they wanted. Something they said could change things. We didn't understand it. We were scared. We trusted them." His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "They said if we cooperated, the rest of the family would be left alone." "And then what?" I asked. What happened that night? Dad pressed his hands to his face. They came for him early, told us there had been an accident, told us to tell the family he was gone, closed casket. No questions, no records. He looked up at me, eyes filled with a kind of grief I'd never seen on him before. Your mother and I didn't bury your brother. We buried our guilt. I felt sick, physically sick. And you thought we'd never find out? I asked, barely able to get the words out. You thought this would stay buried forever? He nodded, shoulders shaking. I thought it was the only way to protect you. I stared at him. This old man who had always seemed so unbreakable, and for the first time in my life, he looked like a coward. A terrified coward who'd handed over his own child. Finally, I asked, What did they do to him, Dad? He shook his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. I don't know. They never told us. They just said he was part of something bigger now. Something bigger. Something classified. Something that kept a 9-year-old boy hidden for 42 years. I left the nursing home in a fog, the photo burning in my pocket again. By the time I reached my car, one truth was clear. My brother didn't come back to reconnect. He came back because he was running. And whatever he was running from, it wasn't finished with him yet. I didn't hear from Tommy again for 6 days. 6 days of checking every shadow, every parked car, every late-night noise outside my house. 6 days of replaying my father's confession until it stopped sounding like a memory and started sounding like a warning. By the 7th day, I'd convinced myself he'd disappeared for good, that maybe he'd been caught, or dragged back to whatever program had owned him all those years. Part of me wanted to believe that. It was easier than thinking he was still out there, terrified and alone. Then, just after midnight, someone knocked on my door. Not pounding, not the kind of knock that demands attention, but soft, hesitant, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they deserved to be there. I opened it without even checking the peephole. He stood on my porch with a hood pulled low, rain dripping from the brim. He looked thinner, paler, his cheeks hollowed out like he hadn't slept in days. I'm sorry, he said before I could even breathe. I shouldn't have come back. I stepped aside, and he slipped in quietly, like he'd been trained his whole life to take up as little space as possible. I closed the door and locked it, though I knew damn well a lock wasn't going to stop whoever had taken him as a child. He stood in the living room, dripping water onto the floor, staring at the framed pictures on my walls. My kids, my wedding, vacations, birthdays, all the years he missed. You have a family, he murmured, a life. You should have had one too, I said, and my voice cracked in a way I didn't expect. He sat heavily on the couch, the exhaustion finally breaking through his defenses. I sat across from him. No questions, no pressure. Just two men who should have grown up together, now strangers with the same bones. Finally, he said, I didn't die, but a part of me did. I waited. There were tests, he continued softly, training, isolation. They wanted to see what I could do, what I could endure. Sometimes they called it a program. Sometimes they called it a mission. He gave a small, broken laugh. But mostly, it was a prison. My chest tightened. Why didn't they let you come home? He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach twist. I knew things, he said. Things they didn't want me telling anyone. Things I wasn't supposed to survive knowing. What kind of things? I asked. He shook his head. If I tell you, they'll come for you too. I leaned forward. They already came for me the moment you called. He stared down at his hands. I escaped because I thought I had time. I thought I could explain everything, tell you the truth before they found me. But they're closing in. They never stop once someone runs. I swallowed hard. Why come to me at all? He hesitated, and then his voice cracked open. Because you're the only person who ever saw me as something other than what they turned me into. Because you're my brother. There are moments in life when grief and love collide so hard they feel identical. That was one of them. Seeing him sitting there, older than he should have been, younger than he deserved to be, stripped of everything except the thin threads that still tied him to us. It broke something in me that I didn't even know was still intact. I reached out and put my hand on his. He flinched. Not because he didn't want the touch, but because it surprised him, like no one had touched him gently in decades. "What do you need?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "A chance." "Then you'll have it." He shook his head. "Not from me. For me." His voice went almost whisper soft. "I don't know how long I can keep running. I can disappear again, if it keeps you safe. But before I do, I need you to know I didn't leave. I didn't choose any of it. I was taken." A long silence settled between us, heavy, sacred, unsteady. "Where will you go?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere off the grid, somewhere I can stop being who they made me." He stood. I did too. I wanted to beg him to stay. I wanted to tell him we'd figure it out, fight whoever these people were, bring him home for good. But he read my face before I spoke. "You have a life worth protecting," he said gently. "Don't blow it up trying to save mine." And then he pulled me into a hug, a tight, shaking hug that felt like both a reunion and a goodbye. When he stepped back, he wiped his eyes, pulled up his hood, and said, "Thank you for answering the phone." I opened my mouth, but the words didn't come. He slipped out the door as quietly as he'd come in. I stood there for a long time after he disappeared into the dark, listening, hoping, terrified, proud, heartbroken. I don't know where he is now. I don't know if he's safe. I don't know if the people who took him are still hunting him. But I do know this. My brother was buried 42 years ago, and last week he came back to life long enough to tell me the truth. Whatever comes after resurrection isn't clean. It isn't simple. It isn't comforting. It's messy, terrifying, unfinished. But it's real, and it's mine.